Gedvach. There's a tradition from the Alter Rebbe that there are three things Hasidim consider to be mitzvahs, even though they're not officially mitzvahs, and three things they consider to be sins, even though not officially sins. Tonight I want to focus on the three things that Hasidim consider to be mitzvahs, although they're not officially mitzvahs, and they are: number one, to be smart; number two, to be happy, always find the goodness in every situation; number three, alacrity yet with thoughtfulness, or in Hebrew, zrizus v'mesinus, have alacrity yet with patience and being methodical. So I want to share with you three stories about these three themes. The first story is about the Heilige Rizhner. There was a chassid Rizhner who was very wealthy, and unfortunately, he was very wealthy originally, and he had a son and a daughter, and he gave them a lot of money, and they also became very wealthy. And he was living in Lemberg, but as time went on, the wheel of fortune turned for him, and he lost all of his money. So he reached out to his son and to his daughter, and he asked his son and daughter to help him out, and his son and daughter both refused to help him. So he traveled to visit his Rebbe, the Rizhner Rebbe, Bezalel Rizhn, and Bezalel Rizhn immediately writes a letter for him and tells him to bring this letter to the Chassidim, his Chassidim in Lemberg, where he was from, and to give them this letter. The letter said, please help this guy out, and he's fallen in hard times. So he takes the letter and he goes to Lemberg and he shows the Rizhner Chassidim in Lemberg the letter from their Rebbe, the Rizhner Rebbe, and all the Chassidim have this meeting and they get together. They put together 500 gulden for this chassid, and he takes the money and he invests it, and he becomes again very, very wealthy. I forgot to mention that when he had lost his money and his son and daughter stopped speaking to him, his wife got sick and she was so heartbroken that her own kids didn't want to help her, and so she died. And now that he became wealthy again, the people in Lemberg paid attention to him, and he managed to find someone else to marry. He married his second wife. When his son and daughter discovered that he was wealthy again, they said, "Oh, Dad, why you hang out with that lady? Come be with us, live with us." The son offered he should live with him. His daughter said live with her. And he wasn't sure what to do. I mean, he didn't want to divorce his wife, but they were pressuring him, and he knew that they didn't stand for him when he was suffering, and so he wasn't really sure what to do, though, because they really put pressure on him and made him feel terrible. So he went to see his Rebbe, the Rizhner Rebbe. Rizhner Rebbe said to him, "This is what you're going to do. You're going to write 3 letters. The same exact letter to your son, to your daughter, and to your wife." And the letter said, "My dear son, my dear wife, my dear daughter, I have lost, unfortunately, all of my merchandise. I've traveled to Leipzig, and I bought all this merchandise. I don't have any merchandise. Can you help me get home?" So he takes Rizhner Rebbe's advice. He sends this letter to his son, to his daughter, and to his wife. And sure enough, a letter comes back from his son. He says, "Dad, I'm sorry. I love to help you, but my wife is a terrible lady. She doesn't want to help you, so I can't help you. Dad, my advice for you is stay with the Rizhner Rebbe. I'm sure someone there will help you out. They've helped you before." He gets a letter from his daughter. His daughter says, "Dad, I would love to help you, buy you a ticket to come home and everything, but we have to marry off our children now, and each suitor is looking to get a nedunya, they're looking to get a gift from us for the wedding, and so, but because of this, we can't really consider helping you out." And then he gets a letter from his wife. "My dear husband, don't worry. I don't want you to worry at all. God has helped us until this point. God will continue to help us. But please don't worry. I'm going to sell everything I own, and I'm going to get you some money and help you get home. But please, you don't have to stand in the market and to beg for money. You don't have to worry about anything. So he gets this letter from his wife, and she actually sent shortly afterwards 25 ruble, and she says, I wasn't able to sell everything so quickly, and this is what I was able to sell now. And he comes home with all of his merchandise that he had purchased in Leipzig, and all the gifts that he had bought his wife. He left that in the wagon. He comes into the home without anything, and she is so happy and so excited he is home. And he then brings all the gifts he brought her, that he had bought for her, and she was happy to see him, and without the gifts, and certainly with the gifts, made things even better. So his son and daughter hear that their dad isn't as poor as they thought he was. So they immediately visit their dad and say, Dad, we heard that you're okay. Why don't you come and live with us? So he takes out the 3 letters from his son, from his daughter, and from his wife, and he reads the letters to his children. So the Rizhner Rebbe was able to show this man how to have the blessing of being smart. Yes, you have to love your children and devote yourself to your children, but you also have to be intelligent and know what the situation is. That was the first story. Second story I heard today from Rabbi Eunuch, who saw this story firsthand. Rabbi Eunuch shared the story about a famous chassid of our Rebbe, Rabbi Reuven Dunin, all Shalom. Rabbi Reuven Dunin, often when he was in Crown Heights, he would stay at Rabbi Eunuch's house, and he was a very straightforward, very honest, very real person. The Rebbe said to Rabbi Reuven, if you have any question, I want you to come directly to me and ask your question. You have an open door policy, and anytime you have anything you want to speak about, just talk to me straight. Just to give you an idea of who Rabbi Reuven Dunin was, he was such a pure-hearted person, such an open, pure-hearted person, that he was once by the Rebbe, and the Rebbe told him to do something, to do A, B, and C, and never started saying because. Do A, B, and C because. He says, Rebbe, please, don't tell me why. I don't want to do it because I understand. I want to do this because this is what the Rebbe has given me advice to do. I don't want to do something because it makes sense to me. I want to do this because the Rebbe told me to do it. Please don't tell me why. This chassid of Reuven, he wasn't originally so religious. He had a lot of ups and downs in his life. But when he turned to Judaism eventually, he had inspired hundreds of people to return to Judaism as well. His home was an open home. There's always people in his home. And the Rebbe encouraged him to be down to earth and to pay attention to the needs of his family. He wasn't so into his own self and his own family, just interested in doing his mission in the world. And so the Rebbe had to encourage him to pay attention to his family. So Rabbi Reuven, because he was so honest, because he was so straightforward, because he was so pure-hearted, the Rebbe told him that he should talk to the Rebbe directly, but any issue he wants to ask the Rebbe, because the Rebbe didn't want him to hear something from someone else who may not be so honest and may not be so straightforward, because he is so honest, he'll take things the wrong way, and people aren't as wholehearted as him. The Rebbe wanted him only to ask any question he had directly from the Rebbe. So Rabbi Reuven once visited New York, and he discovered the following thing. The Rebbe had begun this program where very wealthy people were invited to have a private audience with the Rebbe. People would come together with their rabbis twice a year before Yom Kippur, I think before Pesach, and they would get a special blessing from the Rebbe and a special audience. People had to give a certain amount of money to participate in this special audience. And Reuven had visited the Rebbe. Rabbi Reuven visited the Rebbe for the month of Tishrei, and he sees that the Rebbe's synagogue is set up differently than it usually is, and he wants to know what's going on. So he asks one of the secretaries, what's going on? He tells him, Rabbi Reuven, the Rebbe started this campaign, and the rabbis come with their supporters, and that's what's going on. So Rabbi Reuven told the Rebbe's secretary, I don't know if it was Rabbi Klein, Rabbi Unic didn't know if it was Rabbi Klein or Rabbi Groner, and he says to him, I want to come too. Now, it wasn't a free-for-all. There was a list of people who were invited, but this secretary knew that the Rebbe has an open door policy with this person. He's the only one that I know of that had such a policy. He's the only one that I know that the Rebbe said to him, just knock on my door whenever you want, and I want to talk to you. So he knew that this guy is not someone he could, that this guy is going to come, and that's what's just going to happen. So when Reuben comes, and the way it works is, the first Rebbe gave a short talk, Rebbe spoke to the rabbis, Rebbe spoke to the supporters, and then each person comes by with his wife and family, and they talk to Rebbe for a few minutes or a few seconds. So everyone goes by, and Rebbe Reuven, he sees that the time is almost done. Everyone has basically filed past the Rebbe. So he also goes by the Rebbe. And the Rebbe looks at him like, what's this? Like, why are you here? So he told the Rebbe 4 words. Gam ani rotze liot ashir. I also want to be rich. Gam ani rotze ashirus. I also want to be rich. So the Rebbe immediately gives him $1, and the Rebbe says to him, a blessing for ashirus hanochena. A blessing for appropriate wealth. In other words, I don't have to explain the story, but the Rebbe was telling him, you need to realize what you have, basically. A blessing for appropriate wealth. Bracha with this for appropriate wealth. That's the second story, highlighting the second instruction to the Alter Rebbe, that the Alter Rebbe said chassidim accepted as a mitzvah to always rejoice with whatever they have. And now the third story. The third story about alacrity. This story was shared by Rabbi Shlomo Zalman Hecht, alav shalom, about the famous tzaddik, the Heilige Rishner, Rabbi Melech of, not Rishner, Rabbi Melech of Lezhensk. Melech of Lezhensk had a chassid whose name was Reb Chaim. Reb Chaim was traveling home. It was winter. It was this time of year. It was a few weeks before Purim. And he wanted to travel home and to be with his family for Purim. He's traveling, and he has his merchandise, and he's on the way home, and it's snowing. And he's very tired. It's nighttime. By the way, important thing to know, the Rebbe said whenever you're traveling at night, you should always stop every hour. So he's traveling, it's nighttime, and he has his horse and wagon, and it's his own wagon, and he is guiding the horses, and he is very tired, and he feels his eyes start to close. And he knows in this juncture of the journey, there's a river, and if the horses are left to their own devices, the horses will go to the river, and they'll go into the river to drink. Although the river isn't entirely frozen, it's only a little bit frozen, and it's incredibly dangerous for the wagon to go into the river. But unless he guides the reins, the horses will go in the river. And he's thinking this, and he's thinking, I can't fall asleep, I can't fall asleep, I can't fall asleep. But as he's thinking, I can't fall asleep, he starts to fall asleep. And he's falling asleep, and he starts having a memory about his experience in business. He had a little kretschma, he had a little inn, and people would come to this inn, which he rented from a certain paretz, and they would the farmers in the region, they would pass by this kretschma, this inn, and they would buy beer, they would buy vodka, they would buy mashka, they would buy gefilte fish, whatever they would buy, and it was successful. It worked. It worked for a while. But after a while, someone else opened up another bar near his inn, and so all the farmers stopped coming to his inn, and they started going somewhere else. So he wasn't sure what to do. Should he keep his business open, or should he try something else? By the way, people think that trusting in Hashem means you have to hold on to the same business. Not necessarily. The Rebbe says always ask friends that understand. You trust in Hashem, but the decisions you make should be with, the Rebbe says, Yedidim Evinim, friends that understand. Anyways, he decided to go directly to his Rebbe, the Rizhner Rebbe, Melech Lezhensk, and ask him what to do. Melech Lezhensk tells him, you should sell all that you have and come back. Okay? He sells everything he has, and he makes 200 gulden. And he returns to Melech Lezhensk. Melech Lezhensk says, how much did you bring? He says, 200 gulden. So Melech says, very good, it's a perfect amount. This Chaim is shocked. What does it mean it's a perfect amount for what? He says, listen, there is a family that owns another kretschma, another inn. They couldn't pay their rent from the parrots, from the landowner. And as it was in those days, if you couldn't pay your rent, the landowner would put you in prison. They couldn't pay the rent, they're in prison. They need 500 gulden to be released. I have 300. Would you give me the 200? Would you like to participate in this mitzvah? So Reb Chaim didn't know what to say. I mean, on the one hand, it's a big mitzvah. On the other hand, this is all he has in the world. He sold everything to get this 200 gulden. What should he do? So, without thinking too much about it, his Rebbe is asking him. So he says, yes, Rebbe, I'll give the 200 gulden. So the Rebbe says, very good. Here's 300 gulden. Please go and bring this money to this and this address. He goes with the money, and he brings it to that address, and he comes back to the Rebbe and reports to his Rebbe the success of his mission. Rabbi Melech Lezhensk gives him 5 gulden, a very small amount of money. He says, listen, Hashem is going to bless you with success. You will participate in this mitzvah. You gave your all. God's going to give you success. This little amount of money is going to become a lot of money. And so he takes the money, and he buys something and sells and buys and sells. And sure enough, he is incredibly successful. Very successful. He makes a lot of money. This is all going through his mind as he's in this wagon. He's in different business. And he remembers the year before how he visited his Rebbe, Rabbi Melech Lezhensk, for Purim. And somehow, Rabbi Melech is sharing Torah. It's the Purim meal. And in the middle of the Purim meal, the Rebbe, Rabbi Melech, is sharing his Torah, and he is falling asleep. And all of a sudden, Rabbi Melech stops sharing the Torah. He looks at Reb Chaim. He says, Reb Chaim, Schlaf nicht. Reb Chaim, don't go to sleep. Wake up. And this was the last thing he heard from his Rebbe the year before. He told him directly, Chaim schlaf nicht. And that's what brought him out of his stupor, his sleep. And he wakes up in the nick of time. He grabs the reins of the horses right before they're about to enter the river. And that is how he survives. And he comes home, and he thought about the words that the tzaddik said to him. Schlaf nicht. Don't sleep. Stay awake. And he realized that those words aren't just about not falling asleep. And not only do those words save his life physically, but those words are also an instruction to him not to fall asleep, to pay attention to what's going on in his life. And he started to realize, he was giving 10% of his earnings to charity, but he started to schlaf, he started to sleep. Now he wasn't so careful about 10%. What about 8%? What about 5%? He started to realize that he was praying every day, but he wasn't finishing all the prayers, he wasn't saying the Tehillim. He started to cut corners. And he realized that the words of the tzaddik to him weren't just an instruction to him about saving his life, that he should hold the reins of his horses, but he should hold the reins of his life. And his own schlafen, he shouldn't fall asleep and should pay attention. And that's the meaning of the third instruction of the Alter Rebbe, Zrizus Mimesinas, to have alacrity and yet to be thoughtful and methodical. Think about where you are and what Hashem is asking you to do, and not to fall asleep. The previous Rebbe said that before Mashiach comes, every Jew should turn to his brother and say, my dear brother, it's a long night, the exile's been very long. However, shlafnish, don't fall asleep before the light of the day. Mashiach is about to come. Don't fall asleep. Stay awake. There was a chassid, his name was Rabbi Moshe Levin. He used to say, there are 10 levels in a fool. 10 levels in a fool. Sometimes a person walks into your home, and just the way they walk into your home, you can tell right away this person is off. Another time, another kind of person walks in your home, not the way they walk into your house, but the way they sit down in the chair. They sit down in the chair, the way they sit down in the chair, you can tell, Mashu Loba said, this guy's not okay. Something's wrong with this guy. Another person walks in, he sits down okay, but the way he picks up his fork to eat, you can tell the way he picked up the fork, there's something wrong with this guy. Another guy manages to get further on in the meal. Rabbi Shmuel discussed, as he was gifted, 10 levels of a fool. The 10th level is, the guy comes in, everything's normal, he eats normal, he says the after blessing normally, he leaves normally, he walks out of the house normally, but he closes the door. The way he closes the door, you can tell this guy is out of his mind. So Rabbi Shmuel would say, which of these 10 people is the biggest fool? And he said the biggest fool is the last guy. You think the first guy, the guy as soon as he walks in, no, the biggest fool is the last guy. Why is he such a fool? He says he held it in so long, he could have held it another second. And he couldn't hold in that last second. What a fool. He could have held it in for one more second. So in a similar way, Shmuel said, we're now at the time of Mashiach, the time of the redemption. Shlafnish, we shouldn't fall asleep. We're in the week of Parshas Truma, the week where Hashem instructs us to build the Beis HaMikdash, to build the temple, V'asuli Mikdash, build the sanctuary. It's time to actually fulfill this mitzvah. The Beis HaMikdash is already built in heaven. It's time to bring it down with one good thought, one good word, one good action. We shouldn't fall asleep. We should pay attention to our tzedakah, pay attention to our davening, pay attention to our torah, pay attention to each of us, to our divine mission that the Rebbe has empowered us to do. And very soon, Makar Mamish, we're going to see the light of the day, the light of the true and complete Geula. We see this happen tonight. A good tavach and a freilich avach.